Language models are incredibly fluent, but when forced to parse strict, rule-based logic, a single neural network operating in isolation will routinely fracture. It confidently generates answers that sound plausible, but are mathematically or legally false. In the legal sector, where firms are increasingly relying on predictive analytics to forecast case outcomes, this tendency to fabricate information carries massive professional liability. A system cannot be deployed if there is any risk of it hallucinating a non-existent statute. To solve this hardware-level limitation, engineers have turned to multi-agent debate, or MAD, architectures. Instead of relying on one massive model, they network several language models together to collaborate. This schematic details the core theory. By assigning distinct expert personas, like a judge, an attorney, and a lawyer, the system forces the models to cross-examine each other. The idea is that they will catch each other's logical errors and self-correct before outputting a final answer. That collaborative approach is highly effective for creative tasks, but deploying it in a knowledge-dense, structured domain like the law exposes a severe limitation. Depending on how the system is tuned, these agents routinely fail to identify mistakes. Instead of correcting a bad premise, they latch onto it, reinforcing the error until it is read. This serves as a controlled environment to evaluate collaborative AI behavior under rigid rules. The framework tests agents on legal textual entailment. The models must read a factual scenario and determine if a specific legal statute strictly applies to it, without hallucinating any outside context. Within this environment, engineers manipulate three primary architectural variables: the baseline competence of the model, the mathematical protocol aggregating their decisions, and the scaling of test-time compute. Dialing in these exact parameters is the difference between an AI system that accurately maps complex statutes and one that blindly amplifies its own errors. The first structural variable is the parameter size, or the baseline deductive capability of the underlying language model being deployed. This chart visualizes accuracy data across three distinct tiers of model sizes. It compares a standard single-agent baseline against the multi-agent framework. The data shows that LMAD acts as a cognitive amplifier, but its effect depends entirely on the base model. For massive, state-of-the-art models with 32 billion parameters, we hit a ceiling effect. Their internal logic is already so robust that advanced single-agent prompting completely saturates the benchmark. Adding multiple agents to these models adds computational overhead without improving the result. The framework proves highly valuable, however, for mid-tier models in the 8 to 30 billion parameter range. Here, the debate architecture successfully divides the analytical workload. This text log shows that division of labor in practice. When combining distinct provisions, isolated models often stop after the first clause. The multi-agent setup allows agents to build upon each other's findings to bridge the logical gap in a single turn. However, running this exact same architecture on a weaker 8 billion parameter instruction model actively degrades its performance, pushing its accuracy below the single-agent baseline. This reveals a strict competence threshold for deployment. If the underlying model lacks a minimum baseline of deductive reasoning, the agents cannot challenge flawed premises, resulting in a collaborative failure. The second major variable is the aggregation protocol, defining how agents finalize their decision. The upper pathway illustrates forced consensus. Agents must iteratively negotiate, adjusting outputs turn by turn until they reach mathematical agreement. While forcing alignment acts as a rigorous peer review mechanism for highly capable models, it breaks down entirely when applied to mid-tier systems. When a mid-tier agent hesitates or hallucinates an incorrect clause, it triggers a chain reaction called collaborative hallucination. Because the protocol mandates agreement and the surrounding models lack the reasoning depth to recognize the error, they sycophantically agree with the flawed premise. Deploying forced consensus on these mid-tier models transforms an intended cross-examination into a confident echo chamber, locking the entire system into a false conclusion. To protect mid-tier models from sycophancy, engineers use an entirely different mathematical approach, the independent voting protocol, shown on the bottom pathway. This framework completely decouples deliberation from the final aggregation step. Agents discuss the prompt, but are never forced to agree. By allowing agents to maintain isolated parallel tracks of reasoning throughout the entire debate, the system prevents the network from prematurely converging on a bad idea proposed by a single node. Once the communication window closes, the system implements a ranked choice voting scheme. Each agent casts an independent ballot, and the framework mathematically derives the final answer, effectively leveraging the wisdom of the crowd. To build a reliable multi-agent system with mid-tier models, engineers must prioritize the preservation of independent analysis over forcing narrative alignment. The final variable is compute scaling. Assuming more compute improves reasoning, this chart scales agent population on the left and debate rounds on the right. Scaling agents to 5 improves accuracy by maximizing diversity, but scaling debate rounds steadily degrades system performance. This negative trajectory is a phenomenon known as over-deliberation drift. Instructed to critique previous answers, extended discussion forces agents to manufacture adversarial doubt. An agent generates a spurious critique, flipping a correct consensus into a failure. Unable to resolve ambiguity, they over-critique logic until the entire network regresses. In strictly rule-based domains, iterative self-correction is largely a myth. To preserve accurate conclusions, engineers must hard-code strict limits on the depth of the deliberation. The architectural blueprint for deploying mid-tier models in high-stakes environments is precise. Maximize the diversity of the agents, strictly limit debate rounds, and enforce independent voting protocols. This still leaves the problem of unpredictability at the very end of the process. Even with optimized settings, the independent voting protocol will occasionally result in a tie or a split decision among the agents. This internal disagreement provides a highly valuable native confidence signal that requires zero additional training data to detect. This enables a highly efficient workflow. When the network returns a unanimous vote, it indicates high certainty, and the task can be safely automated. When the vote is split, it precisely identifies the ambiguous edge cases. Multi-agent architecture in 2026 aims to engineer a rigorous, mathematically sound system that identifies its own reasoning limits and knows when to request human intervention.